Hello, friends. I'm here today to talk about the long anticipated It, which officially releases in theaters today, but I went and saw it last night. My favorite theater locally only had tickets available for last night, so we went. And that's pretty rare for me. I rarely go to opening weekend, much less opening night, much less one day earlier than opening night. But this has been a big deal, and if you follow me on Chiaroscuro or on my personal Facebook, I mean, you've seen it has been plastered everywhere. Or if you follow just the horror world in general, I mean, that's all anybody's been talking about for a year. Um, so finally got to see it, and I've been avoiding reviews. I mean, I've seen some headlines here and there. I've been avoiding reviews. I've been avoiding clips. I mean, I've seen the teaser and the trailer multiple times, but that's it because I was really trying to go in with my own fresh eyes and form my own opinions. So this review is a little bit difficult. It'll probably be a little longer than normal and maybe a little bit rambly, so I'm just going to warn you. But I guess I'll just jump right in and give you kind of my pros and cons. Um, and I guess I should give a quick synopsis. I mean, it, of course, is the story of seven friends. They're preteens, teens that live in Derry, Maine, and they're being haunted by this monster who takes the form of a clown. And it's about their journey to overcome their fear and try to kill this monster who feasts on children. And he comes back every 27 years. He feasts on children for, a year or so and then goes to sleep. So if you're not familiar with it, that probably sounded bonkers, but I think most of you probably are. Okay, let me look at my notes here. So I'm going to start with the pros, and then I'll move into the cons. So the pros. Pennywise. We've seen a lot of Pennywise, so this was no surprise, but Pennywise was great in this movie. Now, I had not watched all the clips with him speaking, so I hadn't really heard him speak until the scene with Georgie in the drain. And it's definitely different than Tim Curry, but I liked it. I thought Pennywise was really scary in this movie. There was a use of CGI here and there, but I don't feel like it was too heavy. The main thing about Pennywise that I really liked, though, is that he seemed a little off. Like, he didn't seem like, a human clown. It was a little difficult to understand exactly what he was saying at times, and he seemed like, I don't know, like he seemed not human even when he was in the clown suit, which I think is really appropriate because he's not really a human. He's this monster. He's this otherworldly thing who's trying to pose in such a way that would be attractive to children. So you always kind of have that feel that there's something else underneath this clown that's just not right with the rest of our world. And so that was great. The kids were like funny and relatable. They were a little different than the characters in the book, which I'll touch on that more later. But you like these kids. Like, you want to be in the losers club. You're rooting for them. These kids were, and even though they're losers, these kids were like pretty tough and pretty sure of who they are, even though they're not the cool kids or the popular kids or the strong kids. The setting Derry was great. It was the great small town feel. All the sweeping views of like the streams and the rivers and the sewers, like that was all really great and beautiful. And overall, the movie was pretty scary. Now, I will say it was not as scary as I thought it was going to be. Like, there were moments that were very scary. But overall, it was like there were a lot of there's a lot of laughter in the theater, a lot. So it was a fun movie. I mean, it definitely had some gore and some horrific elements, but it was lighter than I expected. In some ways, it was even lighter than the 1990 miniseries, which I know sounds ridiculous because that thing was wacky and really cheesy at times. But that movie had a little bit more of a dark undertone that maybe this movie didn't quite have. You didn't get the feeling as much that Derry is like in on it and that like the whole town is like wrong. You really get that feeling in the miniseries. You don't really get that feeling as much here. It focuses more just on the kid group and not on Derry at large. You get the history of Derry, but so those were all my pros. And I'm going to get into my cons, and I'm probably just going to go ahead and drop a spoiler warning. So if you really don't want anything spoiled at all, you might want to just stop here, because I'm going to have to get a little spoilery to talk about some of the things I didn't like. So I will say I've heard a lot of stuff about how, oh, this is going to be more faithful to the book. It's going to be more like the book, more like the book. This movie was not like the book. I mean, there were several things, important things that were like the book, but characters and plot points differed quite a bit from the book, more than I expected. And so, I mean, that's not necessarily a con, but I don't like what they did with some of the things that were different. I was happy that they moved it to the 80s. I thought that was appropriate. And they changed the things that the kids are scared of, which is fine. You know, they updated that, and a lot of those were scary. But I was just a little taken aback that it was so different from the book, or more different than I thought it was going to be. And even though the kids were a pro, the kids are also a con in my book, because in the book and in the miniseries, the kids are really kind of like, they're kind of shy and they're timid, and they really are like the losers club for a reason, and they don't really stand up for themselves and become strong until they have that rock fight. And they save Mike, and like that's when they become the losers club. That's when they start fighting back. That's when they become strong. These kids pretty much fight back from the very beginning, which is okay, but I think it's maybe not as meaningful that they've always kind of been scrappy. I feel like it's better when they're weak, and then they finally say, no, we have to do something. We have to stand up. We have to face this. We have to face our fears. So I feel like it lost a little bit of meaning because of that. And also the characters weren't as well defined as maybe I would like. Ben was fantastic. Ben was my favorite. I loved Ben. Such a kind of scared, but also strong character. And he was strong in kind of a quiet way. And he was, you know, he kind of saved the day a little bit here and there, but in just little subtle ways. And I just loved Ben. But Eddie and Richie were kind of the same character. You know, Richie was perfect, wisecracking, obnoxious. He was perfect. But Eddie kind of was a lot like Richie, and Eddie's supposed to be this fragile little hypochondriac who's sort of timid and scared. And he is actually quite a bit like Richie as far as like he talks a lot and he has like comebacks. And so I thought those characters were a little too similar and not well enough defined. Whereas in the miniseries and in the book, I feel like each kid is very unique in their own way and they're easy to differentiate. So that's a little bit of a con. So, like I said, it's unlike the book. I will say the tone of it is not like the book. Like I said, this movie is like brighter and happier, and Derry feels kind of bigger and not as sinister. And I do miss that. I feel like a little bit of that tone of like the dread and the rainy skies and this undercurrent of just like evil, it just was missing for me. And so that was a bit disappointing. Now, I will say, also with the kids, gotta go back to the kids for a second, this movie was rated R, and I think it was really important that this movie was rated R. I think it made fans really excited. I think it legitimized the movie. However, the kids cuss a lot. Like, they drop a lot of F-bombs. Now, for Richie, that's appropriate. For the rest of the kids, not as much. They do cuss in the book. But I almost feel like they had the children cussing be over the top to make sure they would get an R rating. Because I feel like maybe they were worried, oh, what if the scares and the gore isn't enough to get this an R rating? Let's just throw a whole bunch of kids cussing in there to make sure we get that R rating. You know, I don't know for sure if that's what happened, but I do feel like maybe that's what they did. And I feel a little bit ripped off by that if that was the case. So that's just something to note. So my biggest con of this movie, and I haven't gotten too spoilery so far, but I'm about to, so just get ready for it. But biggest con with this movie is we get to the end, Beverly has been kidnapped by Pennywise. She's been taken by Pennywise. And she sees the dead lights. Like, he opens his mouth, he's got all these teeth. She sees the dead lights, and her eyes glaze over. And, of course, this is something that's in the book and in the miniseries, but not with Bev, with other people. And so she zones out, and she starts to float, like literally float up into the air. and you see up in Pennywise's lair, there's all these kids just floating in the air. Literally floating in the air. Sorry, screensaver came on. And I'm like, wait, this whole we float down here, you'll float too, float, that's a huge deal in it. But it's not because kids you literally float in the air. It's because you're in the sewer, you float in the water. It's because he's a spider in the novel and in the miniseries, and you're floating in the spider web. Like, there's a reason you float. It's not just like literally float. It's like clever. And I'm like, what? Why are there literally kids floating in the air? It was weird to me. I didn't like it. Now, Pennywise's lair is actually pretty cool, though, because he's got this huge, big, like, pile of, like, children's toys and clothes, and it's, like, all the things he's collected from the children he's killed, and this huge mountain of kid stuff, and it's a pretty cool set piece. But the literal floating, I just was not a fan of. And then, of course, part of me is like, oh my gosh, people who haven't read the book or haven't seen the miniseries, are they going to think that, like, literally, like, float? It's stupid. So, anyway, that's my major problem. That's my only major problem with this movie. And it doesn't ruin it. It just, to me, was silly. So, those are my pros and cons. I'm going to just give you some overall thoughts. The opening scene with Georgie was beautiful and perfect. And that scene alone makes me happy that this movie exists. We get to see it almost exactly as it was written in the novel. And if you've read the novel, I mean, that takes place in the first few pages, and you know what kind of ride you're in for. And the way it was shot in the music, and you meet Pennywise, and Georgie looks perfect. It's just, and it's scary, and it's graphic, and like I said, that scene alone is worth having this movie. It's perfect. And I also will say that we're in the throes of prepping for Hurricane Irma here, and I'm not the kind of person who gets nervous about such things, natural disasters, and I'm just not a worrier. I do what I can to prepare, and that's kind of it. But this storm has me a little worried. And I thought, you know, I've been looking forward to this movie for months and months, and honestly, years. I mean, I loved the miniseries, but I've wanted to see a really scary adaptation, you know, since I was a kid. So last night was a great distraction, and I told my husband, I said, well, if nothing else, we're going to sit here, and for the next 2 hours, we're not going to think about the hurricane. And I can tell you that is what happened. I was in the Losers Club, living in Derry, in another world, and I did not think about the hurricane. And really, that's what movies are for. You know, good entertainment, that's what it does. It takes you to a different place and a different time, and shows you a story, and hopefully teaches you a lesson. And I think that's always been the strength of it, is it's this compelling story, and it's about life and love and fear and friendship, and I think it teaches us, I think it has a lot of things to teach us about life. So I guess that's it. I mean, I don't know if what I've said really covers the scope of how I feel about this movie, but I like it. I was just a wee bit disappointed because, you know, like I said, there were things I didn't expect. But I'm looking forward to a second viewing, and to see if, now that I know what it is, if I can adapt to some of that and watch it with, you know, new eyes. So anyway, I hope that you guys will all go see it, and let me know what you think. I mean, there are opinions swirling all over the internet about this. I've not, again, read any in-depth articles or reviews or anything, because I still wanted to keep it just my own thoughts. So now I'm going to go out there and read all the things and listen to all the podcasts and see what other people have to say. And yeah, so I'll see you guys next time. And hopefully next time I do a review, I'm in this room and not in a different state or in a different house. So talk to you guys later. Bye.